But like on me or on the starting soon? Oh, okay. Well, there we go. Well, we're still working some kinks out here at Aquino. It is the unofficial or official day one?
It's official day one.
Official day one. It is going to be a slower day since folks are still at work. And
To the public, but it's primarily VIP tickets.
now I bet you're wondering what we're doing here today and who this guy is. Well, welcome everyone to the stream. We did just kick off, so I'm going to give it just a minute for folks to show up and chat. Hello to everyone. Tragic is behind the camera and in chat as we speak, holding so many things. Next time we're going to get a little bit more help. If you're not watching, then, well, I guess you won't get this message. But definitely follow our social media channels, because today I am doing an Instagram takeover. So you're going to follow me all throughout my day and our official world information. We've got morning straight later at 11 a.m. Eastern. And then Saturday and Sunday, we've got a special 1 p.m. very cool museum that are visiting, as well as cameo appearance by Chieftain. But with all that said and done, how many folks do we have tuned in right now?
6 so far.
6 so far. Okay, well, we want to give it a little bit more time. Who is in chat?
No one has said anything.
No one's saying anything. If you're there and you're hearing this, could you just say you can hear and see us? Just so I want to make sure. Oh, Randall Green. Hey, Randall. Okay, if Randall's hearing us, then we are live. Hi, Randall. Good to see you, as always. Alrighty, so we can start our tour here. What we're doing here, we're at the Ontario Regiment Museum for Aquino Tank Weekend 2022. This is the official day one, and to kick us off, we wanted to start with a static tour, a tour of the Static Museum. You know, it's, at least from what I've covered as far as Aquino goes, I'm usually on one of the awesome and beautifully restored vehicles that are outside in the battle arena, the World of Tanks battle arena, and in the field. But today we're going to take a look inside at this awesome Static Museum.
It's formed in 1866
Okay.
as the 34th Regiment of Infantry.
And I forgot to introduce my awesome host here, because this is actually our docent. This is our tour guide. Have you been a member here?
10 years, 10 plus years.
Okay. And you're already got to the director position. I know people that have been here for 30 years.
Yeah, I applied.
Okay, that's all you do. Apply yourself, folks. So before I throw it over, I did want to let everyone know that Dan's in-game name here is Boring Slow Sword. He has lots of cool stories.
Yes.
What's his in-game name?
Terrible Swift Sword.
See the parallels? All right, so Boring Slow Sword, are you ready to take it away?
Sure.
I want to see your favorite spots here in the Static Museum, because I know that's at this point in time, and I know that, and Dan has a lot of cool stories. So I'm going to hand you the mic, and you can take it away.
By a family or whatever they find. Grandpa left a box in the attic somewhere and need any of this stuff. And so we'll take a look at it. And we find some really beautiful stuff, unique stuff. And one of the things I love the most is this little ticket here. It's a volunteer ball for the Whitby Rifle Company. And it's for a ball on February 11th, 1864. Now, there had been militia companies all over Ontario County, which is now known as Durham Regent. And Ontario Province used to be Upper Canada. So basically, Ontario Regiment is a county regiment. And there was companies all over the county. And you got to realize, back in the 1860s, people didn't move that far. I mean, it was, you had to hook up the horse, get in the carriage, or the cart, or whatever, and go very slowly to get any distance. But Ontario had been basically set up with road grids, and you'd usually find at every corner there would be a church, a store, maybe a school, and then there'd be farms all around.
The basics.
The basics. Everyone around. I mean,
In
those
the
are,
States, we call those kissing cousins. But
okay, kissing cousins, but they were doing more than kissing because they were having offspring as well.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is that you had to sort of improve the gene pool, but you had to do it in a socially acceptable way. If you met a girl at a bar, you would not take her home to your mother, okay? So this was socially acceptable, because if you look at the bottom of the ticket, it says admit bearer and ladies. Come back home, and he would find all the unmarried, plus a couple of married for chaperone, to come to the ball. He said, get your dresses. On February 11th, we are going to the Mechanics Hall in the town of Whitby, which was the county seat. And who knows, you might find true love.
Fresh meat.
Okay, fresh meat. I'm trying to be romantic here,
Okay.
but
Well, the stream knows how I feel about
Romance?
being sentimental. Romance is great, sure. Yeah, okay. Back to you, Dan.
okay,
Oh,
so
we're done. Wait, dude. Okay, we're done. We're done here. We're done here. Where are we?
all over the place. So some companies were rifle companies, some companies were infantry companies, different uniforms. So when they went on parade as a regiment, they weren't all uniformly equipped. And the other thing was there was one company that actually was from a region they will say was not that well off. And so they couldn't find someone to buy the uniforms that they would share. So they actually just have a straw hat with one side up. And that was their uniform in farm clothes. But that's a material, but basically these are the original uniforms. Now, basically in 1866, these independent companies were put together, as mentioned, because there was something called the Fenian Raids. And the Fenians were actually these veterans of the U.S. Civil War of Irish ancestry. And they had come up with a clever plan. And their clever plan was to invade Canada, capture Canada, and then negotiate with the British to free. No small feat, rather ambitious. And so basically what happened is the regiments were formed so that they can mobilize a number of companies without denuding the county of men. And they would be posted at various border locations. And there was actually a couple of major battles. There was one battle near Montreal on the border, and there was another battle in the Niagara Peninsula where the Fenians crossed at Fort Erie, and the Canadians moved down to meet them. Both sides saw each other. The Fenians actually retreated back across the border.
Got a question for you. Can you hear me from this distance, or it's better if I hold it for?
It's better if you hold it.
That's what I thought. Technology. You know, I'm aware of Canadian winters. So I'm curious when these battles took place, because a lot of these uniforms, you know, I would imagine that they have some outerwear. You know, they do seem a little thin. How are people actually? How were these actually used in the field, or are these just the dress uniforms for if they were going to the Whitby Ball, for instance?
So they got to wear a green uniform, and they don't have shiny buttons because they were skirmishers. They were the ones who were supposed to sneak ahead and shoot at people. Infantry, they still fought in those days in lines and wearing red uniforms.
Gotta get the red guys, right?
And some wore kilts and
not
whatever. Not in this case,
not in
but
this case.
other units, okay?
Yeah.
So they basically mirrored a British unit,
Yeah.
okay?
Okay, let's go, Dan. What's your next favorite spot?
Okay,
Stop on the trip.
This is our pre-World War I weapons. And basically, what you start seeing is the progression of weapons, and as they get replaced more often as technology improves. So this is the original India pattern flintlock musket. All right, so it had a ball, it went down a non-rifled barrel, and that's why it was rather inaccurate. And that's also why you had all the men standing shoulder to shoulder and firing in volleys and just hoping for the best. Then you have the Schneider Enfield, which is just a rifle model musket. And these were common in the Civil War, in the American Civil War. Basically, there was a guy named Minet in France. So you can drop it down quickly, because prior to that, rifles had to have very tight fitting ammunition. But what happened is when you fired the trigger, it would set off a powder charge, which would force the cone at the bottom to expand and fill in the grooves so it would rifle. You still had to load it. It would rifle as it went down the barrel.
Is this the kind of musket that you're
You could actually you could drop it
and then
and
pack it?
Yep. But the whole idea is that because it was not so tight, because it had that cone at the bottom that would expand, the actual seal was made when you pulled the trigger. And so it would spin down the barrel, go down farther, more accurately, and hopefully hit the target. So after the war, or during the war, we started seeing the American Civil War, you started seeing more and more breech-loading weapons, and they were important. So basically, the Brits went off and they said, we're cheap, can we modify this into a breech-loading? And a young American inventor named Schneider said, sure. And so he created the Schneider Enfield. So what you did is you took the Enfield and you just modified it right there, where you can actually lift up a section at the breech, put in a round, close it, and then cock it, and it would hit a pin that would set off the bullet.
Right.
And then to remove it, you just flipped it open, pulled it back, shake the bullet out.
Easy peasy.
Easy peasy, but most importantly, you could load while lying down. So you didn't have to stand in and get shot while you're reloading. And then we have is always useful. You had the Martini Henry, which is a breech loader, and then you have the first of the Enfield rifles, which is actually a magazine-fed bolt-action rifle.
So as we go down this display, the guns get more modern.
The guns get more modern and a soldier has much more lethality on the battlefield.
Okay. We're going to hit up the next spot. Dan has lots of favorite spots in this museum. As you can see, it's as you'll see, it's pretty robust, and we've got a long timeline to go through. We looked at this yesterday. We're going to look at a couple more small arms.
Okay, so this is World War I, small arms. Basically, you start seeing revolvers and automatic pistols, and basically, pretty much all the rifles are variations on just a bolt-action rifle. That's a magazine that could have 8 to 10 rounds, and basically you just cock, fire, cock.
Which one is that? Sorry, I was...
All of these are bolt-action rifles.
Bolt-action.
Okay, so they're accurate, they're good. One thing that's really interesting, though, is the Lewis gun.
This one down here.
Now, there was an American Army officer named Lewis who basically invented this. And you know most machine guns, if you look over there, they were treated almost like artillery pieces. And you could see that this one had a sled mount, they could have a tripod mount, they're big, they're ugly, they have water cooling. So they're heavy, and they could have a crew of 8 to 14 people just to carry in. It eventually got a bit smaller, but these are heavy things and not very tactically able to move. The Lewis gun, however, is air-cooled. That bracket over the barrel, and there's vents on this side, and the barrel ends about here. And what happens is, as the bullet comes out, it creates a bit of a vacuum that draws air along the barrel to cool down the barrel. And it was a brilliant gun. Lewis tried to sell it to the U.S. Army, and the general in charge of munitions or buying guns basically said, "I don't like your gun, it's silly. And I don't like you." So Lewis quit and left the army and moved to Belgium and started manufacturing these. The Belgians bought them, and when the Brits started manufacturing it, so Mr. Lewis became extremely wealthy. And basically every platoon had one of these in a machine gun section.
So, Mr. Lewis was loaded after this.
Mr.
Unintended? I don't know.
Mr. Lewis became very wealthy. And the real cool thing is the Americans Army, when the Americans joined World War I, the American Army refused to get Lewis guns again. However, the Navy loved them.
Yeah.
And so they bought them, so the Marines had Lewis guns.
Smart. Chat, any questions from chat so far?
No questions right now.
Okay.
Just some conversations about the Lewis gun, how it's still 100 years old, still kicking.
Still kicking.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's 100 years old and still kicking. Thanks, chat. It sure is. And you know what I love, Dan? Because you did mention that a lot of the artifacts that you have here were donated by people that were like, for my grandpa, I inherited it. And I can't help but notice you have, even, not only do you have the weapon itself, but you are so many small, little fine details like that here at the Ontario Regiment Museum static tour, where you're not only going to see the weapons and the uniforms as you might expect, but you're also going to get extra touches here, or handbook here, and then even coming tragic, even coming this way towards where we had the was it water-cooled machine guns?
Yeah. That's actually the case for the site.
Oh, it's a case for the site, but like you have the accessories, so you have the helmet. A lot to see. We have this awesome, is this called a diorama?
It's a display.
A display. Are these all hand designed and hand built here on site?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
Yes, they are. And actually the cases we've designed and we had manufactured elsewhere by actually one of our members who is a furniture maker. So where the cases come in, yeah, we do it ourselves, sort of. It's a volunteer. He is paid to do it,
Right.
but he's a volunteer at the museum.
And that is something else that I wanted to call attention to, because at the start of the stream, if you were here, I introduced Dan here. He is the director of operations. He is one of only, what, 3 actual employees?
Yep.
But everyone else that is here at the Ontario Regiment Museum, they do it out of like the passion, their interest, the goodness of their heart. They're all volunteers, and they're helping to maintain not only the vehicles, like I've told you about outside, but also everything that you see in here, and the awesome sort of just that simply down to the furniture. That is the sort of thing that volunteers are coming in to help with.
Yep.
What are some other things that some of the volunteers would do here outside of, just what maybe many people would expect, like working on the tanks or driving the tanks? Because obviously that's cool, but not everyone has that mechanic skill set or tank crew skill set. What are some other?
I will tell you honestly, if you pass me a screwdriver, I will guess the handle, which side is the handle, 50% of the time. Okay? There's people here who are amateur historians. People are taught how to maintain the vehicles. And then you'll start learning stick, and then maybe an M113, because they're fairly easy to drive.
As you may have seen in Tanks 101 series with me and the Chieftain.
Yep. And
Filmed right here at the Ontario Regiment Museum.
but what's really important is before you even drive a vehicle, you have to learn to check all the fluid levels. You have to learn check tire pressure in the case of a wheeled vehicle. There's a whole series on it, what we call a first parade checklist.
Right.
I
did that.
Exactly, that is taught to everyone. And they usually use a checklist to ensure they don't forget anything. So we will teach people how to drive vehicles. Some people love being guides. They learn everything in here. They become great guides. And there's a wide variety between those two things. There are people who are mechanics and guides.
Right.
But there's a lot of things. We have people who are running a kit shop. So if you're retail experience, we have people who are running our canteen in the back. All right.
Cooking those sloppy joes.
Cooking no slop, as with any group. If someone has a skill, I'm pretty sure we can find a place for that skill here. We actually have a few people who work in crime labs with analyzing weapons. They are fantastic at cleaning whenever we have to start cleaning our weapons, because there is very few weapons they have not taken apart, put back together.
And that's, one thing that I want to hit on that you did mention is you can come here with that passion. And maybe your passion is you know a lot about history, but maybe you've always wanted to get behind the tiller bars of a tank or the M113 for this instance. And those are skills that can be taught here. So if that's what you're interested in, that's part of what the Ontario Regiment Museum will do. They're passing on that knowledge to those folks that are interested in it. And that's another thing that I think a big thing, and maybe perhaps, bringing us just full circle here, what we're doing here at the Static Museum, why we're kicking off a Kino Tank Weekend here at the Static Museum, is the importance of passing on this oral history, passing on this living history, because without places like the Ontario Regiment Museum where you can hear more, you might not know those stories because maybe your grandpa never told you about his time in the service. And it's up to the historians here at museums like this to kind of pass it along, because those stories might have been shared with folks that were kind of shoulder to shoulder with your grandpa in battle, and that's where you're hearing that story retold from.
Yeah, and one of the things, just to emphasize, we are looking at this as a long-term project. I want this yet. So what's happening is that we are, one of the things we actually have to do is when someone who's ex-military comes in and says, I know how to drive a Leopard, I was a Leopard driver, we're going to say, we're going to teach you how to drive museum style.
Right.
Because in the Army,
Can't whip it around.
you have a truck behind you with mechanics and all the spare parts in the world. Here, we have a good supply of spare parts, but if they're going to last for the next 100 years, all right, we have to not use them all every day.
We got to teach you how to not break a track.
Bingo.
Right.
Which unfortunately someone has actually live streamed when we had to put a track back together a couple of years ago.
Oh, sorry, I missed that. All right, so Dan, where else are we going? What's another favorite stop on your tour of the Static Museum?
Well, like I said, weird stuff that people collect, bring along. You see the guy was collecting buttons, regimental buttons, because every regiment would have a different button or two.
Oh, right
And
down here.
yeah, so he got belts and he just sewed them onto belts. And and of course, Grandpa passed, and they arrived here, and we go, what an incredible find.
I like the French champagne. Okay.
Yes.
Wow.
And then, of course, this is stuff that basically, in many cases, civilians who were trapped just behind the lines, it couldn't work the farms or anything, they would start making, they'd get shells, and they would start making various things with various shells. So creamers, ashtrays, letter openers.
Oh, artisanal.
Artisanal, exactly.
Yeah.
And so we carry on here, and we get to World War II weapons. They were actually designated an armored regiment in the middle 30s when someone realized that tanks might be useful. And so they did not get any tanks until the actual war started. And they got trained in Borden, and they started using Ram tanks, they started using Matilda tanks, Churchill tanks, and then they eventually received the Shermans. They landed in Sicily, they fought their way through Sicily, ended up in Italy, and fought all their way up Italy until it was time for them to move from Italy to France, to Holland, to Germany.
Museum. So can you tell us a little bit about, I guess, maybe some of the shining stars in your World War II tank collection?
Well, let's see. The oldest would be a Stuart, M3 Stuart. We have then a Chaffee, M24. We have two Shermans, Bart and Billy.
Bart and Billy.
And then let's see what else. You're trying to get, oh yeah, the German side, we have a Panzer III, we have a Hetzer, we have a couple of German half-tracks. We're rebuilding an M3 half-track right now. I think you've seen, so in about a year it should be ready. So that's about it for World War II, I think. And then we have, let's see, in the 50s, we have a T-54, we have a Centurion that we rebuilt. We found an engine in the States, brought it up, and we had two sort of gate guards, two monuments, and we managed to steal enough radiators from them to get two that functioned, etc.
There was a comment in chat that the museum here probably has an easier time finding parts than they're having finding parts for their actual truck right now.
Yes.
Would that be the case? Like, oh, I'm just going to keep my eyes peeled in the right marketplaces to know, okay, that part is what we've been looking for. We need to go snag it now. Or are people actually coming to you saying, hey, we've got these extra parts. I know that you have these vehicles as part of your lineup. Do you need them?
Yeah, we get both, actually. In some cases, when we find out that a particular things are going out of service, and if we know that the Army has at it, because it's actually, if they have, let's say, road wheels, they basically have to remove the rubber from the metal, and that's rather expensive because they can't just melt it all because it's got to be done environmentally safe. Right. So in some cases, it's a lot
like a mutually beneficial.
Yeah. If they have some extra stuff, they can give it to us because we are a military, and we will store it away, and when we have to use it.
Okay.
So. But we do buy stuff as well.
And that is a good point to
make. A lot of stuff.
To highlight that it is a military museum. So can you explain to some of the viewers at home that might not be familiar with the sort of relationship that a military museum might have, and as the Ontario Regiment Museum, what that kind of means in terms of your connections with?
Well, we're a Canadian Forces Museum. Okay, so we are acknowledged. There is a Canadian Armed Forces publication that lists all the official regimental museums and the War Museum, etc. Across Canada, basically have smaller regimental museums. They have a few vehicles. They have odd displays like we do. Yep. These regiments have all been around for 200 years. So they do have a history. And so there's a lot of regimental museums. The artillery in Toronto have some World War II 25-pounders and quads and limbers and all the rest. And they're an artillery museum, so of course they have some artillery kit. Yeah. And as a military museum, we are acknowledged as some
procure some really special things.
Yes.
Speaking of special things, I saw something in chat about a Fiat. Didn't the museum have a Fiat last year?
Actually, and they brought it down, and I believe they're bringing it down again tomorrow.
Okay. And
so that is another military museum we work with.
Yeah, so if you are in the area and planning on coming to Aquino and didn't get a chance to see it was beautiful, the Italian Fiat, come on down because CFB Borden will be coming out Saturday and Sunday of this weekend. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's go. What's next?
All right. The regiment was in Italy, and these are various uniforms that would have been used in Italy. So you have someone in, going out.
Speaking of Italy,
Speaking of Italy.
Tragic, you have a good shot? You want to get set up? Get in close here. Let's see. Because there's a lot of things in this
Yep.
display.
So this is just one display. It's supposed to be sort of an OP. But that's the background. So an observation post. So what you have is you have a tank crewman in a crew suit. You notice soldiers always wear lots of webbing. They're indicated to have all sorts of pouches.
You don't want to get hooked on your way out of a hatch.
Exactly. So you'll find that they used to wear a one-piece suit with lots of pockets.
Okay.
All right. That would be a dispatch rider. When you were in periods of radio silence, or there was a lot of motorcycles that were used during World War II, and they would have a leather overcoat to help cut the wind, and that was basically the jerkin that they had. And that is an officer somehow got lost, and
He does look very clean, by the way.
he does, and he looks way overdressed to be on the battlefield, and so he's probably found a girlfriend nearby.
Okay, hey. At the Whitby, no, I guess we're in.
Back always to this, we find boxes of stuff.
Wait. I want to go to that one last. Can we stop here? Can we stop here?
Sure.
Because this one here is giving me kind of like Dune, like sci-fi, Star Wars vibes. So can you tell me a little bit about what this uniform would have been used for and in what era?
Well, this would have been a World War II uniform, but actually it's a raincoat. Oh, well, hold on. It's a raincoat, but it's also used as a anti-gas protection. All right, so mustard gas, you would wear, mustard gas could do blisters, also gloves, and of course you wear a gas mask.
Yes.
And this would give you some protection from that. The mask would protect you from most other gases that really do bad things to your lungs
Okay. So
or your nervous system.
at the bare minimum, you've got this. At the bare minimum, you have this raincoat to protect you, that first layer of defense, and then there are a couple of gas masks down below, which, for obvious reasons, are good to wear when there is mustard gas in the air.
Yes, they're very useful at the time because although there's asbestos in some of these filters, asbestos only kills you about 40 years later, but gas will kill you immediately. I would have to check. How's that?
No, please don't check. Just leave it.
Okay.
Okay.
You like this.
I do. I like what you showed me yesterday. We did. I went around with Dan yesterday for a little bit, and so I'd like something in here, but maybe we could.
You want to save it?
Yeah, you can. Yeah. Do we have more? Do we have more stops? Let's
have
go.
more stops.
Okay, we're going to save that for last.
Okay, so again, we had a crazy padre, and this is all other regimental stuff. The padre actually was Waldo Smith. I guess with a name like Waldo, he had to become a padre.
Obviously.
Obviously. And so he wrote a book of his experiences in Italy, and he was with the unit, became a rather famous religious person.
Whoa. Dan, we can't just skip over. What is this?
And it was Major Millen, who was at the Battle of Aquino. And a shell exploded above his head, and it obviously penetrated. And he survived.
Wow.
And so
Endorsement for wearing your helmet, but it's also a good endorsement for coming out to Aquino Tank Weekend. And since we're talking about Aquino, can you tell us why, how Aquino Tank Weekend came to get its name here at the Ontario Regiment Museum, and a little bit about the history there?
Yeah, Aquino was, if you've been to Italy, Italy doesn't have very many flat places. And around Aquino, you have some flat land because there's a major airfield complex. And so basically, it was good tank country. It was also very good anti-tank country. And the Germans had Panzersturm, which are tank turrets sitting on concrete bunkers. They had tanks. They had anti-tank guns. It was really interesting, but was taking very heavy losses. And they eventually had to withdraw. So it was not a victory. It was retaken, or it was taken subsequently. But the actual Battle of Aquino for the Ontario Regiment was optimistically not a disaster. Okay? But it is a very important battle that the Ontario... So it's 7.62, it's got a 20-round mag, it is fantastic. The only thing that's better is a C2, and that has got a 30-round mag and a bipod and heavier barrel. Semi-automatic only, but accurate. And when you're hit with 7.62, you fall down and don't get up. Anyways, just like the M14, which is basically the American equivalent, used at the same time. And they've actually, a variation has come back into service, I believe, with the Americans for